Here we are. Hello there, we are MAIO. I'm Mana, and here Guillermo, Alfredo, and Maria with me in the first row. I know that it's 10 o'clock in a Sunday, and I really, really appreciate that you're here. I was imagining ourselves alone with the whole auditorium. So I appreciate the effort, this collective effort, and we're gonna go for it. So we're MAIO, and we started like around 5 years ago. In the deep crisis of Spain, it was 2011. And we decided somehow that we need to do something. So we decided to start an office that could rethink the practice of architecture itself. And with that goal in mind, we took a ground floor in Gracia in Barcelona, to arrange a space for us. And basically what we did was just to take out the roof of an existing room and turn it into a patio and divide the space in two areas. The front space, it's always empty, and is where we meet and gather basically, and do events, etc. And the back space, that's the patio, and the back space, which is the most important piece, is where we work around this table of 12 meters and a half, this continuous table that not only defines the space itself, but defines the way in which we work. Around the table, we gather with different colleagues and disciplines, so somehow we merge our works, from construction engineers to graphic designers, product designers, as architects. And we like to consider that somehow the table defines how we do understand architecture. For us, architecture doesn't have kind of a beginning or an end, but it's always a continuous momentum. It's about defining format. So we do believe that a format can define and can allow things to happen. So we're more interested about what can happen rather than what it is itself. Soon after opening the office, we won a competition that it was larger than this one, but it was that moment in Spain that basically nothing could be built. And at the same moment, the city council had many, many empty lots that were kind of a conflict because they were waiting to be built, but no money was there, and the money was not going to come soon. So neighbors started to complain. So with really low budget, the city council hired several architects in order to propose ephemeral urbanism. And so the idea of ephemeral urbanism for us, it was quite a challenge. Also the fact that we mostly lack of budget. So after talking many times with neighbors and realizing that nothing really could be done with such a low budget, and understanding that there was an ephemeral urbanism, we started to to question ourselves, what is an ephemeral urbanism? What means to do a city that is ephemeral itself? So basically we almost did nothing. We just placed a grid of lighting poles, yellow lighting poles, and just allowed things to happen as we like to consider architecture. So basically, with that grids of lighting poles, we draw a set of situations, kind of instructions of use, and give them to the neighbors in order to allow them to continue the square without us. So these instructions of use kind of empower citizens to imagine future possibilities and somehow understand that that square was going to be always in a permanent state of unfinishedness. It was always going to be unfinished, waiting to things to be performed there in a kind of an eternal situation. With the lighting poles, we did this trick of just, little cables that were connecting the lighting poles in order to also kind of an infrastructure to allow things to happen. And we took these pictures a year later, and a year later we had already trees, we had already benches, sun shadows, playgrounds, and even statues. So neighbors were deciding how to grow it, and were implementing little by little. The fact is that now we don't have pictures recently, but if you go there, you will see that there are much more benches, like 4 types of different benches, 2 types of different playgrounds. So it's about concession and about consensus, neighborhood consensus, the square. Regarding the idea of instructions of use and formats, in parallel to the square, we were asked to design a bar. But it was a kind of a tricky demand, because it was not a bar. What they wanted is to design a spatial identity that could be applied in many locations, in many stores. And with that in mind, they asked us also to design a Catalan bar. So we start, defining this imaginarium, what a Catalan bar means. And of course, Catalan people, we are kind of dry and simple. Our food is, we don't have humor, it's true. Our food is like this, right? With, really simple. We eat just toasted bread with tomato, like squished tomato, that's all. And for us, it's the most delicious dish. So considering that, our architecture is also like that. It's quite simple. So with this idea that we had to come out with something that could be applied to any place, we decided to be simple as our food and just do one thing that could be implemented everywhere and could keep this spatial identity for a Catalan bar. And of course, if you look at traditional Catalan architecture, and if you ask a Catalan person what is really Catalan architecture, they would say a vault, because basically we are so proud of this, and that we even consider that the vault system is Catalan, and we call it Catalan vault, which of course we can discuss about that. And if you ask me, I'm pretty sure it's Catalan vault, but I know that vault appears anywhere in the world, but we're proud of being the first ones, and it's not true for sure. Well, in any case, so we decided, let's do vaults, like Catalan vaults, and apply them anywhere as a system, a format that can be anywhere. And this is the first result that we did. We had this first bar to refurbish and turn it into pure Catalan. And so what we did was just basically we placed the balls in a manner that they were crashing with the pre-existent. This is interior. And these balls, what we like a lot, it was they had their own character, like life itself. So they were crashing with the pre-existing, forming these awkward shapes from the outside, and building this desire to come in. Of course, we wanted to show also that everything was fake. Even a Catalan identity is fake. It's a cultural construction. So we left these balls as an ethnography. So you were coming through an ethnography, and you were aware of this situation from the beginning. We play a lot with this idea of ethnography, and the bread with tomato was coming out like magically from a hole. So there were a lot of ironies and jokes, cultural jokes that I'm not going to talk today, but it was filled. It looked simple, it was filled with irony at the end. About instructions and views, we were asked to reflect about the idea of instructions of use for a gallery. And the exhibition was going to be called The Way Things Go, quoting Fisley Wise. And we start looking for instructions of spaces and collecting this kind of imaginary of architecture that you can buy and get it by mail, through the post, and build it by yourself. So kind of a do-yourself Imaginarium, and of course World Earth Catalog was there, and we realized that there was a nice story. There's a nice story in World Earth Catalog. There's a this dome designed by Buckminster Fuller that appeared at the Wallace catalog, and it was popularly sold by through Popular Science. So in Popular Science there was an advertisement that you could send a paper asking for the dome, and the dome was send it to you, but not the physical dome, but rather the instructions of the dome. So Fuller was selling domes through Popular Science. And we thought that that was so fantastic. So we looked for the patent of this dome. And we basically, what we did, we sent literally these instructions of use, how to build the Buckminster Fuller dome to the gallery. And that was it. Of course, we did a little bit of tricks. We marked them a little bit, giving some tips that don't try to do this joint nowadays. It's kind of impossible. You won't be able to do it. So kind of some tips for the workers of the gallery in order to be able to perform. But the trick is the following. We knew already that the couple was not possible to be built inside the space of the gallery because the dome itself was bigger than the space of the gallery. So it was impossible to be performed. The instructions of use were impossible to be performed as they were defined. So somehow we knew already this situation. And of course, what we looked for, it was this moment of awkwardness, this moment of receiving something and trying to do it and not being able to do it, and forcing yourself to invent a possible solution to it. So there's every time that we design an instructions of use, an order or a format, we expect kind of a transgression of it. So the fact that this cannot be performed and you have to transgress it and somehow deform it in order to do something, it is part of the idea itself of instructions of use. So at the end what happened is, of course, they lack of money to buy metal bars, and they end up buying a wood, escoba, ¿cómo se dice escoba? A brush? Broom, no? Broom? Okay. Okay. And they use, to perform the knot, they used a hose, for watering the plants. So it was really, they were really smart in the manner they appropriate the instructions of use and perform the sphere in the gallery. So the idea of disruption is always there, and we like it. One of the questions that we received regarding the piazza that I was explaining to you before is, don't you bother that people just, do things? Like place new furniture without your control, and we actually like it. We think that it's part of the game itself. So you have to think to let things happen. You have to allow to let things happen. Sometimes, so we design instructions of use, formats, and systems, and sometimes we build them, sometimes not. So you will see today a lot of type of projects, from really buildings to almost nothing. And we like this kind of projects that look like nothing has been done, but there's a lot behind it. We were asked to do an intervention with an artist, Luz Broto. We were talking with the students yesterday about this. Luz, with Luz, who's an artist that we really like and follow, we decided to take a look to the place. We were asked to do something inside the Architects Association gallery. The display is in this nice balcony with a fantastic view of the main square in front of the Cathedral of Barcelona, so it's a fantastic spot. And what is curious is that every time that you go there, you hardly have the view of the square, because the gallery is always filled with an exhibition or something shown there. So we thought that that was a pity, that this momentum of emptiness was really kind of nice, and the relation with the square, like this space as a balcony of the square, was quite interesting. So we started to look at the square itself rather than inside, to do something outside that could change that into a balcony itself. So we basically asked a topographer to draw the square. At the end, drawings make things happen somehow. So when you draw something, this thing starts to exist already. And we draw the topography of the square in order to not only to know it, but to control its form and to analyze it. And we all realized that there were two places in the square. There were the lower ones, of course, where the rain was going there, and in that spot, of course, there were a couple of drainage. So what we did was to block the public drainage, waiting the rain to come. And this was the appearance, so it was really hard to perceive that something had happened there. And the day of the opening, the people was arriving to the exhibition space, nothing was there, just this drawing with the topography of the square, and suddenly a subtle marking a possible lake. So what we were building somehow, it was the imagination of a possible landscape, a new paysage, a new landscape that could be performed thanks to the rain. So, of course, we wanted to rain, but nothing happened. Not even one day rained during the exhibition. So it was kind of frustrated, but on the other hand, it worked even better because the imagination of the visitor was even stronger. Just to imagine that lake, that it was not there but could be there, it was so strong that it worked at the end. Regarding things that are not perceived, so architecture that it's there but it's not there at the same time. Again, we were asked to do a collaboration with an artist, Marcio Kogan, that it's an artist that works on the idea of copies. I'm okay in time? ¿Me estoy hablando? ¿Sí? Vale. ¿Me avisáis, si me enrollo? Vale. Vale. Sorry. I really can't, I talk too much sometimes. So if you're tired, just, hey, shut up. Okay, and I will stop. So we were working with this artist, Marcio Kogan, that he works on the idea of copies, copying architecture. His father was not an architect, not a designer, but he liked building furniture and building housings. So he was copying in the 70s really nice popular designs. And this was a house that he built in the north of Catalonia. And Marcio Kogan started a project of copying this house. So every time that he is invited into a gallery, this is Palais de Tokyo, for instance, he built the house and always implemented a little bit. So the house is being constructed through time every time that he's invited into a gallery. So he asked us to do something inside, to do something with this. In this gallery, so at Palais de Tokyo, the house lacked of a roof. In the gallery, he could paint the roof. So we start thinking, okay, what does it mean to copy a house? What is really a copy of a house? Is this a really copy of that house? Which is the distance between reality, so the original, and the copy? And of course, we start thinking about what is a house. And somehow we realized that actually Marcio Kogan was not really copying architecture, because when during the exhibition time, we realized that hardly no one was entering into the house. It was kind of a piece of art, so somehow you have the feeling that you cannot touch it. People was walking around but never entering to the house. So we thought, okay, this is not really a copy of the house, because architecture starts when the use start somehow. So if it's not under use, you cannot tell that this is really a house. It's not inhabited. So we wanted to force people to come in. What we did basically is to produce rain inside the gallery in a way that you could not be outside unless you wanted to get wet. It forced the people to come inside and gather and finally use it, and therefore turn that phantom into a real copy of the house itself. And you have to imagine that it was a sunny day, so that was kind of magical. Regarding, this is our last built project, but it's a project that started 2 years ago, like around 2015. So it's been a long process. We were demanded by Harper, that is a furniture company, to design a spatial identity for them that they could use through time. So with the idea of designing something that can happen again and again and again. So, of course, we were already working with this idea of formats, and we proposed them to build 5 simple elements that they could be rearranged through time, forming different spaces and places. So at the end, it's quite simple. It can be as simple as you want, or it can be as complex as you want. We worked in this way before, in a lower scale, for an art school. We were commissioned to design an exhibition system, and we present this kind of play food gadget that could be arranged in different manners in order to define different exhibition displays. So with this little, like, simple corner, that it's actually the minimum that can define as in a space, a corner, you could arrange different types of exhibition spaces, like from rooms to walls to zigzag, panoramas, etc. And at the end, what we like about it is that at the end, it's just defined by simple elements, kind of a game for children, and that the result can be as diverse as they want. So somehow, it's not that we did it on purpose, but that was on the table and back on our mind, and this little system that it was light and simple, it turned into something larger with Harper, and it turned into architecture. And somehow, like in a larger scale, I mean. So somehow, these 5 elements that there were just walls here could do larger spaces. So the first pavilion that we did for Harper was this, at Milano, the last Milano fair. And we rearranged the system in order to define a urban square. It's a pavilion around 1,000 square meters, so it's kind of large. So we decided to define a square inside the Salone that was going to be enclosed by little houses around, each of them having its own character, like a city within a city. So you see how the system at the end defines this kind of paysage of different spaces and interiors in order, of course, at the end to show furniture and experience the furniture of the company. We were really interested on focusing points of view, on trying to work on this kind of relation between spaces, like glimpses of what is inside, what is outside. And we work with the same system in the same Salone, but with really tiny pavilion booth. It was just, this one was 200 square meters, so you can see the difference from 1,000 to 200. And we use the same system, the same structure, but we work in a complete opposite manner. Instead of building little spaces, we built a huge white box that the form of the system was just perform as glimpses inside this box. And we work with just, you know, the idea of transparencies and translucencies in order to perform the furniture. Coming back to formats, we have been quite obsessed in the last years on the idea of the generic space, that space that could be anything. And we were asked to design an exhibition space for MACBA. The exhibition was going to be related with Species of Spaces from Josh Perec. And of course, the curator also asked us that the exhibition display could itself be kind of an argument related with Species of Spaces. This piece of Nicolas Roeg, that it's an artist that a few years ago he published this book called Story Without Characters. A spook story without characters. It helped us to understand how to define the exhibition itself. What is of Nicolas Roeg? What he did was to take an old cartoon from Donald Duck, Pato Donald, the famous Donald Duck, which is, you know, kind of a super popular common cartoon. And what he did was basically to erase all kind of personages, of course Donald Duck himself, but also any type of letters and description of the things. So suddenly what usually is in the background, kind of in a secondary level, turns into the first ground. Suddenly what is secondary turns into principal, but more than that, suddenly any story can happen within the same cartoon. So there's a point of abstraction that was totally of our interest. How to arrive to that point of abstraction that any space can have any type of a specificity. Of course, we had this on the table. It's quite a famous drawing of this ocean that at the end anything can happen in it. So at the end what we did was this simple grid of rooms. All of them were similar, kind of a repetition of a same form that at the end defines its a specificity through the content, but rather the continent. So it was through the objects displayed there, through the art pieces, that you could feel the specificity of each space. There were nice coincidences between the works displayed and the space itself, but it was totally a coincidence. This was one of the pieces that was displayed in one room from Leon Ferrari. And of course, then you were walking around this display, and each room had this room was the room of the bed, the room of the living room, and each room had this feeling through the objects display. One of the things about formats that we have seen already at the bar that we are also quite interested on is the idea of the exception, the disruption, something that is apparently wrong, but it's thanks to that you realize that there's a rule or an order above it. So these moments of awkwardness, these moments of encounters of the grid with the pre-existent building of Richard Meier were totally of our interest. Spaces that couldn't be used, doors that couldn't be used as doors itself, but they were really important to understand the whole thing. And I'm introducing you to this project because of this other one, and this is the last one that I'm going to explain today. This is a housing block that we finished last year. It's in Barcelona, in the middle of Eixample. And of course, for those that don't know, Eixample is basically a neighborhood defined by a grid that can grow almost as an infinite manner. And in this homogeneity, a lot of things happen. So there's an heterogeneity inside this homogeneous grid. And for us, of course, I think that defines our behavior. So we start collecting houses of the original Eixample from Ildefonso Cerdà, some from him, some from others. And we realize also that there's quite a nice characteristic of this neighborhood. The neighborhood has changed through time quite radically, from houses to offices place, from offices place to store, back to housing now. And all these changes have been done inside the same infrastructure without radical changes. So the outside, even the inside, have hardly changed. And that kind of possibility has been, to change through time, has been able because, as you see, the arrangement of the rooms are kind of equal. So there's almost no corridor, and each room is connected to another one, and more or less they have a similar size. So in any room, anything can happen. So with that goal in mind, we decided to do kind of a reenactment of the traditional house in Eixample and basically arrange the house by rooms, more or less similar, so more or less equal, kind of similar. With the idea of that any room could be used for anything. Even the kitchen could be placed anywhere. And the key of this flexibility is basically the position of the bathrooms. There are strategically situated in order to pass through them all kind of installations, and it's through the bathroom that you can connect to any room. So electricity, AC, heating can be supplied to any room. So the kitchen could be also placed in any place. And along with interest of the generic space, for many years we have been researching about the idea of kitchenless house, of the lack of something in the house, of an important piece of the house. And we have been collecting floor plans, kitchenless floor plans, in order to understand how they work and why that happen and why, but it's something that we're not going to come into that today. But most of them have the possibility to change through time, to enlarge and decrease depending on the demand. In this case, for instance, is a floor plan from the San Remo from end of the 19th century in New York. And you can see that there's a room that connects two apartments. So each apartment can be enlarged by this room or connected to the other apartment through this door. And at the end, you can connect even 4 apartments at the row, enlarging a simple and a small apartment into a really large one. So this idea of a house that it's not like its limits can change through time, it was totally of our interest. So we proposed the client to do the same with this building. At the end, for us, the building is a sum-up room. We call it 110 rooms because of that these rooms can be connected and disconnected through time in order to rearrange different typologies. One of the keys of this possibility is also that each door is not like a small door, but it's really large doors. So this helps the connection between rooms, being able to merge 2 into 1. And we were with this idea of a diffuse house was also on the table with the idea of the generic, and we were asked to do a piece for a gallery. We were asked to do a kind of a reenactment of Roma Interrota, a group of architects. We were asked to work on Rome, but in this case we were asked not to redraw a part of it, but rather to design a house for the future of Rome. So what we did was we took a generic housing book, like from Germany, and it could be like from anywhere, and we started cutting rooms from these generic floor plans, and basically, you know, throwing the rooms in a flat surface and placing them in Rome. Apparently there's a Rome in Canada. So, you know, again, with this idea that, you know, Rome in Canada could work. But basically the main goal of this was to explain that at the end, to show a house that doesn't have a clear limit. So it's quite difficult to understand when it starts and ends. And also a house that it's defined by a set of rooms that not necessarily have to be connected. So this idea of the diffused house is actually what we're working on now. And I guess that it's going to be the next obsession for a few years. Coming back to Provenza, to the housing block in Barcelona. Meanwhile, with the apartments above, we were working with this idea of increasing and decreasing. What we did with the ground floor was totally the opposite. Again, it's a reenactment of a housing block in Barcelona. So what we look at how the popular ground floors were displayed and defined until then. And usually it's a space of social representation and gathering, where the richest material is always used and kind of represent the status of their inhabitants. So we decided to work in an opposite manner. Meanwhile, above there's a grid of rooms. Below, it's just a set of furniture, kind of again reenacting the fact that in these ground lobbies there's always kind of a set of fancy furnitures. And we just display it along the ground floor, connecting also the interior with the exterior, and kind of designing it in the same manner in order to kind of build up this illusion that inside you can be outside and outside you're inside. And we use this colorful marble in order to represent and reenact this way of building the lobbies in the 19th and beginning of the 20th century. Again, with this idea of inside-outside, we left the patios open, so it rains here. And it's really nice when the rain comes down and everything is floated for a while. So you come up from outside raining inside, and then you get wet again. In the facade, once again, we just copy kind of the tradition. We took the tradition and work in the same manner. And there's a really nice tradition in Eixample that they use this stucco, like taking the ordinary facades. They use the stucco to explain the story of the family, the story of the owners, or the story of the people that lives inside. In our case, our owner had, the owner of the building had, like 100 years ago, the family comes from the textile industry, and they produce gloves. So we basically took this idea to define the pattern of the facade in order to give some historical glimpses, and the rest we basically copied the rhythm of the pre-existent, like these vertical voids and quite opaque and massive facade, in order to, behave as we were already there. One journalist one day told us something that we considered it was a nice comment, kind of flattering. She thought that the building was a refurbishment. And that's fantastic. So this person thought that, yeah, this was already there, and we just, paint it a little bit. And on the opposite, in the back, certainly, Chambre has these two sides of facades. The front one is opaque and always paints a story, and the back it's always kind of more chaotic and with this wood shutters. So we basically leave them also and put them exactly the same and build huge balconies in order to be occupied. And I'm going to finish with this case, just as an anecdote, that we use it a lot to define how we do understand architecture. In 1974, Michael Asher was the artist. Michael Asher was commissioned to do a piece in this art gallery in Los Angeles. And for those who didn't know Michael Asher's work, it was quite difficult to disguise where the art piece was placed. You were coming into this gallery, nothing apparent was there, nothing apparent was happening. But what Michael Asher did was he just took off the wall that used to split the gallery into spaces, the back, so the offices of the gallery where everything is happening daily, and the front as exhibition space. With this just simple and radical architectural gesture, taking off a wall, basically Michael Asher was showing the insiders of the art wall and putting in front something that was in the back, showing the social connotations of what is behind this. And somehow we feel quite comfortable with this kind of works, understanding that architecture sometimes is not apparently visible, but let things happen, let things visible and allow to happen. Thank you very much.